All right, strap yourselves in because we are diving deep into a topic that's, well, kind of scary, to be honest. AI and warfare.
Yeah, pretty intense stuff.
So we've got all these academic papers here, and they're all about how AI is changing the game.
Well,
Like, really changing the game.
big time.
In modern military stuff, cybersecurity, and international relations, which is a whole other can of worms, right?
Absolutely.
So think of this episode as your guide, like your crash course, to understanding how AI is already messing with military strategies, the good and the bad that comes with it, and all the ethical and legal headaches it's causing. Headaches for everyone.
Right. And what's really fascinating and a little bit unnerving, to be honest, is that AI in warfare, it's not science fiction anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not some movie.
It's happening right now, and it's evolving super fast. It's already out there, influencing conflicts around the world.
Okay, hold on, let's back up a bit.
Sure.
When we say AI in warfare, what are we actually talking about?
Okay, so good question.
Are we talking like Terminator-style robot armies marching across battlefields?
Not quite robot armies, not yet at least.
Okay.
But it's, moving in that direction. Think more along the lines of autonomous drones.
Drones.
But we're not talking about your everyday remote control drones.
Right, right.
These are really sophisticated systems that can be programmed to identify targets and engage them on their own without a human controlling them directly.
Whoa.
So they make the decisions themselves.
Yes. And this isn't just some theory or something that's being developed. It's already happening. Countries like the U.S., they're already using AI-powered drones for surveillance and targeted strikes in active conflict zones.
Wow, I had no idea it was already that advanced.
Yeah, it's happening. Okay, so it's not just in labs anymore. It's out there in the real world.
Out there in the real world, that's right. And what's even crazier is that AI is changing how military decisions are being made, and not just on the battlefield.
Really? How so?
Okay, imagine an AI system, right, that can sift through tons and tons of intelligence data.
So like satellite imagery, communications intercepts, that sort of thing.
Exactly, all of that. And it pinpoints patterns that would take human analysts forever to uncover.
Wow.
And this kind of real-time intelligence, well, it gives a military force a huge advantage.
Makes sense, yeah. But how much should we be trusting these AI systems, especially when we're talking about people's lives?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a huge dilemma.
Yeah.
And it's not just some niche topic for, tech people or whatever.
Right.
AI in warfare, this is a global issue.
Yeah.
And it's got massive implications for the whole world, for international security.
Yeah, no, it's serious stuff.
It is. You see, these papers are arguing that AI is like this key driver in a new kind of arms race.
A new arms race, huh?
So in the past, it was all about who has the biggest army or the most powerful weapons. But now, it's about who has the smartest AI.
So it's not just about brute force anymore.
Right. It's about having the most advanced AI. And that makes things way more unpredictable and, well, it could destabilize the entire world.
So we're talking about some seriously complex stuff here. Like, if AI gets to the point where it's making life and death decisions, who's actually in charge? Who's responsible when things go wrong?
Yeah, those are the questions that keep me up at night. And it's not just me. It's ethicists. It's legal experts. It's a lot of people who are trying to figure this out.
It's like AI is adding this whole new layer of crazy to warfare, and we're just starting to wrap our heads around it.
Yeah, and to make things even more complicated, there's cybersecurity. It's another area where AI is like a double-edged sword.
Oh, how so?
Well, on the one hand, it can be amazing for defense. Think of an AI that's always watching network traffic, catching anything suspicious.
Like a super smart security guard for our computers.
Basically, it could neutralize threats before they even have a chance to do any damage.
That sounds honestly amazing, but I'm guessing there's a catch.
There's always a catch. The same AI that can protect us, it can also be used to attack.
Oh, right. Of course.
It could be used to find vulnerabilities, launch super-targeted attacks, and even mess with critical infrastructure, like power grids, financial systems, the stuff that keeps the world running.
Okay, that is a little terrifying.
It's a lot to think about.
Mm.
And all of this is happening while international law is scrambling to keep up with the technology. It's like trying to write rules for a game that's constantly changing.
Yeah, that's gotta be tough, like trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly. A lot of the rules of warfare, they were written way before AI was even a thing. And now we're dealing with questions that have no easy answers, like, can an autonomous weapon be held accountable for its actions?
Right.
What happens if an AI breaks international law? It's all uncharted territory, really.
So basically, we're stepping into this new era of warfare. where the line between human and machine is getting blurry, and nobody really knows what the rules are anymore.
That's a pretty good summary, yeah. One of the big takeaways from all of these papers is that the current laws just aren't equipped to handle AI.
Interesting.
Like, there's this thing called the Martin's Clause that's been used to, fill in the gaps in international law for a while now. It relies on the principles of humanity and the dictates of public conscience.
Okay, but how do you apply those principles to a machine?
Exactly. Machines don't have a conscience. They don't feel empathy.
Right. This is a huge conversation that needs to happen, and it can't just be governments and military people. This affects everyone.
It really does.
So we were just talking about how international law is having a really hard time keeping up with AI and warfare. These papers get into some of the really specific issues.
Yeah, it's complicated. One of the biggest things in international law is this idea of distinction. It
Distinction.
means being able to tell the difference between, combatants and civilians.
Right, so you don't attack the wrong people.
Exactly, making sure that attacks only target military targets. But when you add AI into the mix, it gets really murky.
Yeah, I can see that. How do you even begin to teach a machine about the nuances of war?
Right.
The difference between a soldier and a civilian, how much force is okay to use, all of that. It seems like that's where things could go really wrong.
That's exactly what people are worried about. Can an algorithm really understand a battlefield?
Right.
It's chaotic. Things are always changing.
And there's the human element, too, which is always unpredictable.
Yeah. So even if you could program a machine to follow the rules perfectly, what happens if it breaks down or makes a bad decision? What if civilians get hurt?
It's a tough one for sure. There's also this argument in the papers that AI could actually make war more humane.
Oh, yeah, I've heard
That, because machines don't have emotions, right? They wouldn't be driven by things like fear or anger, things that can lead to really awful acts in war.
It's a really interesting idea.
So the argument is that a machine would be more objective, less likely to commit war crimes than a human soldier.
Yeah, like it could just make decisions based on logic and data.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's not that simple. Even if a machine could perfectly follow the rules of war, which is debatable, there's still the question of accountability.
Right. If something goes wrong, who takes the blame? You can't exactly put a computer on trial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest obstacles to figuring out how to regulate AI in warfare. How do you hold a machine accountable for its actions?
It's a tough one.
If an autonomous weapon, commits a war crime, who do you punish? The programmer.
The company that made it.
The commander who used it. These are the kinds of questions that no one has really answered yet.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're still trying to figure this out, the technology keeps advancing.
It does feel like we're racing against the clock here.
Definitely. All these increasingly complex AI systems, they're fueling this new kind of arms race.
Like we talked about that before, right?
Yeah, countries are competing to be the best, not just at making weapons, but at making AI.
And what does that mean for everyone else? If a few powerful countries end up controlling the most advanced AI, won't that make things even more unequal?
It's definitely a valid concern. It could create this huge gap between countries that have AI and countries that don't.
And one thing that really blows my mind is that AI is designed to learn and change, right?
Right.
So doesn't that make AI inherently unpredictable? How can you really control something that's constantly evolving?
That's one of the biggest challenges with AI. It's not a fixed thing. It keeps learning, adapting. Sometimes it does things we didn't even program it to do.
And that makes it hard to control, right?
Exactly. And it makes it hard to know who to hold responsible when something goes wrong. If you can't fully predict how AI will act, especially in a crazy environment like a war zone, how can you be sure it's going to follow the rules?
These papers also bring up this idea that AI could actually make wars more likely. If machines are making decisions at super speed, is there more of a risk of things escalating out of control?
Yeah, that's a real concern. AI can process information so fast that it could speed up the whole timeline of a conflict.
Right.
It could make decisions so fast that humans wouldn't have time to step in and stop something really bad from happening. Imagine, an AI misinterprets a signal and boom, it triggers a war.
That's scary. But even though there are all these risks, the papers also say that AI isn't necessarily good or bad. It's a tool, right? And like any tool, it can be used for good things, too.
You're totally right. We tend to focus on all the ways AI could make war worse, but we can't forget about its potential for peace.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. What are some of the ways that AI could help create a more peaceful and stable world? How could we use it for good?
Well, for example, think about peacekeeping operations.
Yeah.
AI could be amazing at monitoring conflict zones.
Oh, yeah, like a watchful eye in the sky.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It could spot potential problems and warn peacekeeping forces before things get out of hand.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about humanitarian aid and disaster relief? Could AI help with that?
Oh, absolutely. It could analyze data to figure out the best way to get aid to people who need it.
Right, right.
And it could even help us predict and prevent future disasters.
So there is hope that AI could not only help us reduce the damage of war, but actually help us create a more peaceful world.
I think so.
But the big question is, how do we balance the good with the bad? How do we harness the power of AI without letting it get out of control?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. It's going to take a global effort to figure it out.
Yeah.
Countries need to work together. We need ethical guidelines.
Right, and a real commitment to making sure AI is used to help humanity, not hurt it.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just develop the technology. We need to develop the wisdom to use it right.
Well said.
So we've talked about the potential of AI in warfare, and we've talked about the risks, but how do we actually regulate something this powerful? How do we create rules for a technology that's constantly changing?
It's a massive challenge, no doubt about it. Like traditional arms control, that's all about tangible things.
Right, like limiting the number of missiles or tanks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But with AI, it's not just about the physical stuff. It's about the software, the algorithms, the data. It's much harder to control.
So it's not as simple as saying, okay, no country can have more than X number of AI-powered weapons, because the AI itself is constantly getting smarter.
Yeah, and even if you tried to regulate specific applications of AI in warfare, like, say, autonomous weapons systems, it gets really complicated really fast.
Oh, how so?
Well, how do you even define an autonomous weapon? Where do you draw the line? How much human control is enough to say that a system isn't truly acting on its own?
Right, right. That makes sense.
I mean, even the experts are struggling with these questions. It's not easy.
These papers do mention that there are already discussions happening at the international level, right, about how to regulate AI in warfare. What are some of the ideas being tossed around?
Well, one of the biggest things is transparency. If a country is developing AI for military purposes, they need to be open about it.
So no more secret projects.
Ideally, no. They need to be upfront about what they're doing, what the AI can do, and what safeguards they have in place to prevent it from, being misused.
Okay, I get that. Transparency makes sense. But I can also see why some countries might not be too keen on sharing all their secrets, especially if they think it'll give their rivals an edge.
Yeah, that's the tension, right? National security versus global security.
It's a tough balance to strike.
It is. But the argument for transparency is that it could actually help reduce tensions and build trust between countries.
Okay, yeah. Like, if everyone knows what everyone else is doing, it's harder to be sneaky about it.
Exactly. And along with transparency, there's also a push for clear international norms and standards for AI development and use in warfare.
So basically, a set of rules that everyone agrees to follow, like a code of conduct for AI in warfare.
Yeah, something like that.
Hmm.
These norms could cover things like the ethical principles that should guide AI development. They could specify how much human oversight is needed for different types of AI systems, and they could lay out consequences for countries that break the rules.
That makes sense. But even if everyone agrees on the rules, how do you actually enforce them?
That's the million-dollar question. Verification is a huge challenge. AI systems, they're not like nukes or tanks.
Yeah, they're not big, obvious things that you can easily count.
Exactly. They can be developed and deployed much more secretly. And figuring out if a country is secretly building or testing AI weapons, well, that would require a level of global cooperation and trust that, frankly, we haven't seen before.
So it's a lot more complicated than just signing a treaty and calling it a day.
Oh, way more complicated. We're talking about building a whole new system of checks and balances.
It's a tall order, for sure.
It is. But the stakes are high. I mean, the future of warfare, maybe even the future of humanity, could depend on getting this right.
Well said. It's a lot to think about, but it's clear that this conversation about AI in warfare isn't something we can just ignore. It's something that affects all of us.
100%. The choices we make now about AI will have consequences for generations to come.
So we need to be informed. We need to stay engaged. And we need to ask the tough questions, like, what kind of future do we want to create with this technology?
Exactly. It's not just up to governments and military leaders to decide. This is everyone's responsibility.
And that, listeners, wraps up our deep dive into the world of AI and warfare. We've covered a lot of ground today, the incredible possibilities, the very real dangers, and the urgent need for global cooperation and ethical guidelines.
AI is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It's up to us to choose wisely.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you'll keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the complex issues facing our world.